Today, I'm going to show you how to budget your attention. One of the best steps that you can take in developing healthy technology habits and a healthier relationship with and technology in general is to come to terms with a fundamental constraint that we all face as human beings, which is that we only have so much attention to give to the things, hopefully, that we care about in a given day, week, month, year, and really over the course of the rest of your life. So in order to plan effectively, to make good decisions in the moment when you have so many different things vying for your attention, some of which deserve it, many of which do not. Many of these digital distractions, unfortunately, we find ourselves bombarded with. In order to make good decisions in both the short term and also plan ahead, it's really important that you understand exactly what your constraints are. So we're going to go through a short exercise. It should only take about 10 to 15 minutes. This video might be a little longer because I'm going to add some color to explain some of the thinking behind the calculator. We can go in depth into some of the ideas behind it to kind of deepen your understanding of what the output is going to be. But the exercise itself will only take a few minutes. And so I'm going to show you exactly how to do it right now so you can follow along. So we're looking at a web page that you should have gotten a link to. This is one of our resources that we offer to parents. This should have come through your email inbox when you signed up. There are other resources available as well, so you can navigate to them by clicking here or here. We'll send emails when we publish new ones, but those are great resources to help you at your own speed get a handle on technology at home. All right, so budgeting your attention, the first thing you want to do is open the template itself. Now, this is an Excel file, which means, there we go, onto my downloads. You can open it and use it with Excel, with numbers on Mac, and then also with Google Sheets. I prefer Google Sheets, one, because I'm used to it, but two, because it makes it easier to share. It has sharing features. So if you want to set an example for your kids or your spouse, it's quite easy to show them your own life budget, what you've come up with. All right, so I'll show you quickly. You can open this with numbers if you would like. I actually don't have Excel on my machine, but as I mentioned, I prefer Google Sheets. So I'm gonna upload this to my drive, and then I'm going to double click on it. See, so it reads it as an Excel file. I'm going to save it as a Google Sheet. I don't know if it really makes a difference, but I'm just going to do that. So that makes it easier if I want to share this with my spouse, for example. I can do that. We can add comments, etc. But the sharing feature is always nice. All right, so what are we actually looking at here? So let me zoom in a little bit to make this easier. All right, so we have up here, these are the things that we'll be calculating. These are basically your line items for your attention budget, which is mostly measured in hours, but I'm going to explain why that is and is not necessarily the best way to think about your attention budget. But it basically calculates across a bunch of different activities that you care about. How much time do you have to allocate to these things? And how much time are you ultimately left with after you've allocated time and attention to the things you care about to other activities that may come up, that you might want to react to, or other things that you're going to want to plan for. But this is really the output. So we'll calculate things at the day. I have work day here for reasons I'll explain in a second. The week, month, quarter, year, decade, and potentially the rest of your life. Of course, how long you're going to live for is fundamentally uncertain, but this is at least kind of a benchmark you can use. All right, so that'll get populated based on things that we fill out down here. Now, of course, this is a spreadsheet. You can modify this as much as you want. You could change the formulas. You can add and subtract things as you see fit. I would recommend going through this process first, just so you get the groundwork in place and you kind of understand how to use it. And then feel free to make changes. I mean, this is yours to do with as you please. It's just a tool. So let's go through the different variables. First thing, so birth date. I think the average American I looked up is around 40 years old. So I just have this as the placeholder, but I'll put in my birth date, which is October 9th, 1991. All right. Average life expectancy is 75 for the average American. You can make this whatever you want. With advances in technology, hopefully it will be much longer. But again, the future is uncertain, so we'll see. I'm quite optimistic, but let's, to be conservative here, we'll leave it at 75. So that means that as a rough estimate, I have, until about 2066. So the second half of the 21st century. Up until then, I have a lot of attention that I can dedicate to the things that I care about. All right, the next thing to fill out is the number of hours of sleep I need per night. I've tried doing just slogging through tough times on 4 hours, 6 hours, like very little sleep. Tried taking naps. Although yes, everybody is different. My intuition and some of the research shows that 7 to 9 hours is about what you want. I sleep a lot. So I'm going to be a little conservative here and sort of err on the side of 9. I do have nights where I sleep very well for 9 hours. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 8, but it's up to you. I would recommend putting 7 to 9. All right. Hygiene. So this is, taking a shower, brushing your teeth. Hopefully we're all engaging in some routine that involves hygiene. I'm going to say for me, it's, probably on average, something like 30 minutes a day. It's closer to 60. I don't know. But, if you enjoy your time in the shower, I guess could be a little more. All right. Weekly spiritual obligation. So, for folks who do go to synagogue, church, mosque, meditation, insight circles, there are certainly many flavors of this, and for some folks, a lot of Americans don't have any particular weekly practice. You could just put 0, or you could put the amount. For me, this is probably a little over an hour. Again, I'll be conservative and say 2 hours a week, something like that. And then, for folks who have holiday obligations, this doesn't apply to everybody. You can, of course, put 0. Here's another placeholder for that. And this will fit into the yearly attention calculator piece. So for me, it's 6. Daily practice. So if you sit on the mat first thing, as many people do, have a little bit of tea or coffee and meditate, pray, contemplate. That's maybe for some people it's going for a walk. But if you have a daily practice, here's a good place to account for it. I know as somebody who's had that as part of his routine and also kind of fallen off the bus or off the wagon a few times, this is something I found to be very important that I do want to budget for. So I'll say for me it's about 30 minutes. And note the units are a little bit different for the different things. So this is days, this is hours, this is minutes, but just fill that out. All right, reflections. So if you go back and read the doc, there's information around what to do, after you filled out the budget. One of the things that I highly recommend is reflecting upon what you've actually done in a given time period, especially when it comes to your use of technology. So if you're an Apple customer, they have a really fantastic screen time feature on the phones and the computers, and it's getting better and better. If you have a family set up with Apple, you can also look at what your kids are doing. I think really using that to its full effect requires some dedicated attention. Doing it just kind of like glancing at it, not quite as useful. In the same way you would do some kind of budgeting exercise or financial planning, I would recommend doing some kind of, periodic reflection upon these, what your digital activities are. So reflections per month, put like 1 Maybe if you're starting out, you're doing it once a week or something, but I think doing some kind of reflection is important. All right. How many hours are you going to reflect for? I've found that doing it for more than an hour is probably good because you really want to think about why it is you're engaging in certain activities. If you see that, hey, I spent some insane amount of time on Twitter last week, like 20 hours or something, or playing a game or something like that, and it didn't make me feel satisfied. It doesn't mean that immediately you should delete it and get rid of it, although that may be the solution. At the very least, you want to spend a little bit of time digesting the information and thinking about, well, why was I doing that? Was it a distraction from something more important but more difficult that I wasn't attending to? Do I get something out of it that is satisfying? How do I construct my relationship with that particular application or digital interface in a way that is going to leave me most satisfied with the least amount of attention into it? There's sort of a lot of things that you can think through. I'd recommend giving it a couple of hours, to be honest. All right, weekly exercise. So, I mean, same way it's like sleep is super important. Taking care of your bodily self, getting some exercise is good too. For me, between walks and weightlifting and things like that, it's probably realistically about 6 hours. I try to take a month off per year. This could be 0 for you, but I find naturally that, especially doing things that are more high intensity, taking off like, 2, 3, 4 weeks of just like not really working out that hard once a year, makes it easier for me to not get injured. So this is a personal thing, but I just have it in here. Okay. So how many minutes are you spending a day eating? This could be by yourself. This could be with other people. Of course, eating with people you care about, whether it's colleagues or family or friends or whoever else, is always nice. But I'd say for me, at the very least, it's 60 minutes. I would like it to be more, like spending maybe 2 hours a day, but that's something I'm currently aspiring to, having regular family dinners and things like that. But it's at least 60 minutes for me right now. All right, deep work. So this may be a new concept to you. It may not be. It might be something that you've kind of heard about, but it's something that entered the zeitgeist, I want to say almost a decade now. A gentleman named Cal Newport, who I think he's a professor of computer science, but very smart guy, incredibly productive. He wrote a book called Deep Work, and he's published blog posts and he creates videos and everything else that explains what deep work is, why it's important, sort of the praxis of it. And basically what it comes down to is you have certainly so many waking hours in a day, a week, et cetera, but you're actually more constrained than that. An hour is not equal to an hour. What I mean by that is the highest quality attention that you really have in a given day is most likely available to you from around 60 to 90 minutes after you wake up until sometime in kind of midday, early afternoon. So the research seems to show that the number of, quote, deep work hours that you have per day maxes out around 4. Some people may be able to push it to around 5, but it's really 4. Okay, so this is like your highest quality, hyper-focused attention. What does that mean? Okay, well, what it means is if you have an extremely difficult task that you need to or want to accomplish, what's easy to do if you're not planning for it is to let that like kind of kick the can down the road or over the course of the day until you're in the afternoon. And that's not optimal because you're going to be pretty tired, relatively speaking, in the afternoon, and you just won't be able to summon the energy to solve those really difficult problems, those things you need to focus on for long periods of uninterrupted time. So I'm going to draw out this model in just a second, but to explain kind of how this works. But let me first put 4 because that's really how many hours you have available to you on a daily basis to do tough, really cognitively challenging work. And it doesn't just have to be, knowledge work. A lot of people are knowledge workers, but this is true if you're doing something with your hands or, I have a hunch it's kind of true for professional athletes and other people who, are more embodied in their professions in certain ways. But it seems that human attention is the highest quality stuff is really limited to about 4 hours. So I want to draw this out to explain a little better what exactly I mean by this. So here's a model of kind of your whole day, right? So let's say this is, I don't know, like 6 a.m. and this is 6 a.m. sort of the next day. And this is roughly when the sun goes up and when the sun goes down. Not perfect, but just bear with me. So let's say hypothetically you wake up naturally at around 6 a.m., which is when the sun comes up. That's really, how humans work for most of history. Even clocks are like relatively new technology, and artificial light we've only had available en masse for a few hundred years. What I have found is that having 60 to 90 minutes in the morning between when you wake up and when you start your deep work is about the right amount of time to get going. And then you have, so that's at like, 7 to 8 a.m., something like that, right? We'll just say 8. And then you have about 4 hours of deep work available to you. So let's say 8 a.m. to noon. And from noon to about 2, I've experimented with a few different sort of ways to run my schedule, but I find that there's like a mini slump at this period. This is something that people have been talking about. If you go to like, ancient, like medieval diaries and things like that, people talk about, I think it's like the midday demon or something. It's, torporous. But you have this sort of 1 hour, 2 hour period, which I think is really good for lunch and exercise as well. There's some interesting data that shows that you're, I think, strongest, like physically strongest at some point in kind of the early afternoon. But you might need to go look that up, but I did look it up at one point, and that reflects my own experience. So, exercise, eating if you can. And then from around 2 to, I would say, like, really honestly, like 5. So that'll give you an additional 3 hours. This is good for what I call, or it's not what I call, what Cal Newport and others call shallow work. So your highest quality attention is here, and then there's a really steep drop off in quality. You get diminishing marginal returns for each additional hour. So basically what that means is, just keep in mind that not all hours are the same. The things that you really care about and are really hard should be slotted into this time. The absolute ideal best case scenario is you're tackling a problem that you have certainly never tackled before, and ideally nobody has ever tackled before during this deep work time. And then the things you have done before, which are a little less cognitively taxing, things like answering email, maybe spinning up landing pages for a marketing campaign. I don't know. Obviously, it depends on your profession, but those things are a little bit more routinized. You can do in the afternoon, taking business development calls, meetings, things like that. But this is your important focus time. Now, people obviously work late. I work. I try to stick to this, but I do usually work until a little bit later. I would highly recommend having a hard stop somewhere around 8 p.m. and actually limiting your device usage at around 8. I find that I personally try to go to sleep around 10. So I get, kind of my full 8 or so hours of sleep here. And for wind down, this 2 hour period, I think it's super important that you're not looking at any screens. Very simple, very difficult. Just keep your phone out of your bedroom entirely. You can put limits on your devices, but you can have 2 hours at least from 8 to 10, your sleep is just going to be so much better. And that makes it easier to get onto the cycle and use your attention kind of effectively. But this is basically what you're limited to in a given day. If you're, you know, really coming to grips with what your constraints are. So you got about 4 hours in the morning. You got about 3 hours to do shallow work in the afternoon. This is a little bit of a wash. Anything past this is not really that productive. Maybe that's something you want to use for family time, et cetera, et cetera. And then this, you should be winding down for sleep. Limit the artificial light. This is a wake up period in the morning, which, by the way, just kind of a comment on this. I highly, 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 highly recommend planning this out, like what deep work you're going to do on a weekly basis. If you can, like plan out, Monday through Thursday or whatever. And daily basis, at least if you can do that. If you can do it the day before, so if it's Monday evening and you can plan what you're going to work on Tuesday and have confidence that that's the right thing to work on, I would recommend it because it allows you to go into the day with confidence that you're going to focus on the right thing. Now, what can go extremely wrong in this period with technology especially is you wake up, you turn on cable news, you check your email, you check Slack, you check Twitter, you have some interface with the digital world or, global, the kind of this imaginal realm that is outside of your strict local environment. And it can knock you completely off kilter and just ruin your day. And I personally used to live like that. I mean, I had terrible anxiety when one startup job where, things were stressful, which is fine. That happens. But I get into a bad habit of, wake up in the middle of the night, check Slack at like 2 a.m. and see what was going on. Horrible. And that's one bad end of the spectrum. But really the best thing to do is to just not be perturbed by any of those external things at all. So that you can just focus on that thing that you intended to focus on. So that way you don't get distracted, you don't get knocked off course, and you're kind of preserving this extremely valuable deep work quality attention here. Okay, so that's really sort of the thinking around this. So in that model, we've got how many shallow work hours then? It's like 3. Work days per week. Okay, so let's talk about this. I'm just going to put 5 for me, but something to think about is, let me draw this out. The days of the week, we're very much in, sort of like personal experience, speculative territory. I'm not aware of any science that really backs this up, to be completely honest. But let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So let's say those are 5 days. You have Sunday here. You have Saturday over here. These are the days of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our model that we kind of talked about. This is all sleep in the evening. These are your, you have the tiny little wake up period in the morning there. And then you have the deep work chunk here. You have the midday slump lunch stuff. Then you have the shallow work. I have a very strong, and this is Monday, right? And this is Friday. Let's say that you have this standard 7-day week. Generally, I would recommend taking off at least one day, like fully. I think there's a lot of wisdom in traditions that, have a Sabbath day, have like one day that you take off. So, I mean, even if you're just totally, secular person, something worth considering. It does seem to work. Like, it's very, very real, in that sense. So I certainly recommend taking one day off. For some people it's Saturday, some people it's Sunday. And this is why we have kind of our standard work week. Okay. So what that means is, let's say you take off Sunday, you're going to be kind of best rested on Monday. And my experience has kind of shown me that there are, in the same way there are diminishing marginal returns for each hour of work and you put in a given day, there seem to be diminishing marginal returns like by day of week. So if you're able to get, 4 good hours in here, and that gives you 100 quality attention points or whatever, you probably only have about 90 of those points on Tuesday, maybe 80 on Wednesday, 70 on Thursday. Like there does seem to be a kind of a diminishing aspect to it. And in my personal experience, Fridays are kind of a wash. Like I'm not entirely sure why this is, but there does seem to be kind of a natural rhythm. If you've ever noticed this, like in an office environment, people on Fridays are, they're excited for the weekend. It's TGIF. And I have a sneaking suspicion that there is some natural kind of biological rhythm where you just kind of run out of gas on Friday. It's very hard to do deep work. So this I've incorporated into the model of the calculator we'll go into in a second, but just something to keep in mind is you might not actually be able to get that much work done on Friday when you're continuing to set constraints. So by the way, what that means is you only have really 4 chunks of deep work, which means 4 really difficult problems you can work on in a single week. You think that you have, you're some crazy, a banker or something in New York. You're like, yeah, I have 100 hours of work in me per week. No, you don't. Like you don't have 100 good hours. I mean, maybe you can white knuckle it, and then there are certain things that you can do, especially that are routinized. But if you're trying to do things that you've never done before and develop technology and operate on the frontier and do creative stuff, like you really have 4 shots on goal, and that means you have a total of about 16 hours. Maybe if you can do 5 days, you have 20 hours, but that's about it. So those are some pretty serious constraints, which means choosing what you're doing is of great importance. And that's the whole point of this exercise. All right. So, so I put 5 days, Monday through Friday. There are some companies that are moving to 4-day work weeks, which is kind of interesting. And I think reflects the intuition that I kind of have around this. But anyway, could be different for you. Maybe you work more days, work less. All right. Holidays per month, days off. I generally say that's like 2, probably. Months worked per year. If you're taking like 4 weeks of vacation, you're working 11 months, something like that. And then sabbatical. I mean, some people do this. This is also kind of an ancient thing, but like every X number of years, you take off some time to kind of think deeply about the next chapter of your life and what you want to do. I'd say for me, I want to take off like a whole year, probably per decade. I don't know. That's ideal. All right. So now you have your constraints. So let's take a look at this. So we have our line items, and this is of course broken out into certain periods of time. Start with the top one, which is your life. Not even your waking life, your life in general. How many hours of life do you have left? Well, if I make it to 75, it's about 386,000 hours that I have left over the next 10. This is uncertain, right? So you take it with a massive grain of salt. What's a little more certain is, how many hours you have left in the next decade. That's about 87,000. Over the next year, 8,700, or 8,800, I guess. Over the next quarter, so 3 months, I think, we tend to think seasonally. So that's why sort of a quarterly schedule seems intuitive. Corporations, when it comes to strategy and things like that, generally operate on a quarterly cadence. Okay, you have 2,000 hours working backwards, 720 in a month, 168 in a year. And then, of course, there are 24 hours in a day. Now, you subtract all the sleep that you have during that time and see just how much you have left. Well, in your waking life, you have 15 hours in a day, and then et cetera, extrapolates out. We account for hygiene. Let's look at, your religious or spiritual obligation. You have your daily practice. And this, by the way, I think I rounded up to the hours, so it's not broken down to fractions. But, it allows you to be a little bit more conservative and coming to grips with your constraints. Okay, you have reflection, you have exercise, meals, and deep work. Now, the deep work aspect is interesting because there's kind of a unit of deep work, as I just explained in the model, where you can think of it in terms of hours, but I think it's actually better to think about deep work chunks. Like those are like 4-hour chunks where you can just like really focus on tough problems. And this is where things, when I first did this, my stomach kind of dropped out because I realized how little time, like how few at bats I actually have to solve really hard problems, especially as an entrepreneur. My co-founder and I did this together, and it was just incredibly sobering. We realized, hey, we want to accomplish X, Y, and Z over the next year. Well, each one of us only has approximately 200 problems that we can focus on and ideally solve over the next year to get to where we need to go using deep work time. Only 200. And probably quite a few of those are accounted for because, we're working collaboratively on certain things. So maybe it's like 150. So if we want to get across a river over the next year to some kind of, successful bank on the other side, we have available to each of us 150 steps. That's, on one hand, not very much, but on the other hand, it's actually quite a bit if you take it quite seriously and think about, okay, if I take the right steps and I do focus and I do work on these hard problems, you take those 200 steps, 150 steps, whatever it is, and you look behind you like that's quite a distance. And this stuff compounds, right? So if you're focusing on the right thing, you dedicate that attention, yields outsized results. So keep that in mind. 1 year, you have 200 problems you can solve. That's it. All right, shallow work. These are the number of hours available to you to do that if you're working kind of those full days. And this means you have this much attention left per day. So each workday, I have 5 hours of attention left, which is actually a decent amount. I mean, 5 hours in a given day is a lot. I mean, if you wanted to, you could watch, the first 2 movies of Lord of the Rings. That's quite a bit in a given workday. You could spend, 5 hours of quality time with your family, pursuing hobbies. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do with 5 hours. So it's a decent amount left over, but it's also not that much because if you're frittering it away on little distractions here and there, that 5 hours can disappear pretty quickly. So be mindful with how we're using that surplus. In a given week, the same thing, 40 hours, and then of course, month, quarter, year, etc. Again, it's this paradox of it's actually quite a bit, but also not that much. Okay. These are the constraints that you face depending on the things that you want to, what you put in these variables. So choose wisely. Of course, you can add other line items for things that you really care about. If, there's like, family time, going for hikes. I mean, literally anything, you can add that as a line item to account for it and then see really how much surplus you have left over. But this is reality. Facing reality is a great first step to getting a handle on family screen time, really starting with yourself, going through this process. Okay, so this is the first half. The second half is in the second tab. And now we're going to start putting dollar values on your attention. Huge caveat with this, which is that human attention is really on some level priceless. But especially if you're a participant in, the workforce, understanding how valuable certain hours, certain periods of attention are to you in different times of day, days of week, incredibly sobering, really changes the calculus of you letting certain intrusions into your precious time, frankly, happen or not happen. So, for example, after I went through this exercise, which I'll show you how to do it in a second, I got way more disciplined, honestly, way more of an authoritarian, and just like protective around my morning deep work time. So unless it's extremely valuable, the expected value is quite high. I do not let people put stuff on my calendar in the morning. I'll take meetings, in the afternoon, unless it's something that we planned very far ahead of time and there's good reason for it. And it just once you do this exercise, you can't unsee it. You really come to grips with how expensive it is to use your time to focus on something that is not necessarily moving you in the direction of the good. Okay. Now, again, caveat: it's you can't put a price tag on human attention, but you kind of can for the purposes of this exercise. So here's what we're going to put down. Let's put our competitive salary. So I don't know what the average salary in the US is. It's like $35,000 a year or something. 36. That's median income. 36,000. That's 2019. Okay, let's say it's $36,000. This calculates what your hourly wage is, which just divides your yearly salary. And this doesn't account for benefits or anything else, which is usually about 30% of what you're earning. This is just straight salary, but it calculates, this is basically your hourly rate, what you're getting paid if you're a full-time employee. All right. Then what we do is, we talked about in the model, pull this back up, there's a big sort of marginal discount hour by hour after all of your deep work hours are used up. I calculate that as approximately 50%. So you're able to get 50% less work done for each additional hour that you spend working after your deep work hours are used up. Marginal day discount, so about 10%. Whoops, we'll go into that in a second, but I like to think about 10% less value with your attention per day. And then Friday, again, this is based on my experience, but it just like drops off a cliff. Like you're just not really able to get that much done. And now this calculates how many quality hours you have available to you. A quality hour is kind of a unit of measurement that I made up, but it's a way to try to collapse this into a single unit. So you have 6 big points that you can allocate towards things on Monday, 5 on Tuesday, 5 on Wednesday, 4 on Thursday, and really 2 on Friday. So you can get 3 times as much done on Monday with this model than you can on Friday. That's significant. And a quality hour rate is about $34. Now notice that there's a big difference between this and your wage. So there's quite a bit of variety in terms of how valuable that time is to you based on how high quality the attention that you're able to give things is. Okay, so let's say you're working from 9 to 1 p.m. So it's 4 hours. Then what we have here, you see the different values according to the model, how you should value your attention during that time. So if you're making that median income, this is how much it's worth. What that means is, and the range is stark, right? So like Friday afternoons are basically worthless, which is why it's not a bad idea. I think, and it makes sense that people have happy hours and things that are good for social bonding, where it's not as cognitively intensive, but you can kind of get the team together because it's probably not coming at there's not as much of an opportunity cost in terms of, economic value creation. But, your Monday mornings, your Tuesday mornings, you really want to protect these. You do not want people interrupting it. You do not want it to get wasted. Because really what happens is, you have $136 of value that you can really create on a Monday morning. And if you wake up and you check your email and you get one email that just messes with your head and screws you up on a Monday morning, then that email could cost you $136 basically in terms of what you could have done. So I just recommend not doing it. And then you have your shallow work in the afternoon. And of course, this is a pretty steep drop off where I think we know this intuitively. Like you're working late. If you're trying to do difficult creative work from like 6 to 7 p.m., it's an order of magnitude less than doing it from 9 to 10 where you can be really focused. You can adjust these variables however you want, but this is my interpretation. And then, of course, just for fun, let's say you're, super successful. I don't know what the standard corporate career is now, like maybe a, VP of something or other engineering at big tech company. Okay, if you're making $1 million a year, or maybe a machine learning scientist working on all these crazy AI technologies that are coming out, I know they get compensated a lot. Okay, you're making $521 an hour. Again, the difference is stark, right? I mean, it's a whole order of magnitude difference, Monday morning versus Friday afternoon. So protect that time, prioritize effectively, plan. And doing that well, those are things that we can cover in future resources, but that's about it. So at this point, you can share this with your family members or your loved ones if you want to set an example and kind of walk through it the same way I did. I also would recommend, I wrote a little bit of commentary here, just kind of explaining some of the thinking around this particular exercise, things you can do, reflection. And then, of course, some other stuff to look into is, okay, now you've set your budget, you have your constraints. How do you set yourself up for success? By actually changing your personal computing and mobile environment. Literally things like clearing out, like deleting applications that you don't use, setting up constraints with screen time, managing your notification preferences in a way that you're likely to get valuable information. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and this is something I do with parents who I work with families who we work with at Virgils Inc. is going through that process. So if you want to take that next step to make it easy to allocate your time and attention effectively, protect yourself from those distractions, I'd recommend checking out our other resource on how to model healthy tech habits. You can get to it. Here's a landing page, but you can also go back to the resources page, and it's there as well. I call this treating your phone like a toaster rather than a slot machine. All right, and then the small group program. So we offer a couple of other things at Virgils Inc. If you want something a little bit more high touch, our kind of, our core thing is this cohort-based fellowship program for kids generally between the ages of 10 and 16, who, they're kind of in that critical period where they're starting to develop really, serious relationships with technology in a way. A lot of them, next generation's really grown up with it, but that's an important time in development as you're getting a little bit more independent. So what we do is we have our various Virgils, who are our guides who lead small groups in virtual spaces. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of cool. It's a pretty cool experience where the kids get together basically in almost like a video game environment. And over the course of 6 weeks, they learn lessons that help them really get excited about reality and start thinking about some of the things that we've talked about in terms of managing your attention, making good decisions in the context of technology. And if they've, kind of gotten sucked into the virtual world a little bit too much, I certainly did when I was a teenager, and it's, I think, harder than ever to, be careful around those kind of things. Then these are essentially, we provide skills and information that makes it easier to come back to reality, to take reality seriously, to make good decisions with technology towards the end of human flourishing, which is really what this is all about. So if you're curious about that, you can sign up for upcoming cohorts on our website. We also offer a free consultation for parents if you're just curious and want to know if there are any other ways that we can help. We do provide personalized guidance for some parents as well. So take a look and sign up if you're interested. All right, that covers it. Maybe this is the right way to sign off. I'm Christian Alstrup. I'm the CEO of Virgils Inc. I'm really glad that you just spent the last however many minutes, 45 minutes, if you made it the whole way through. Download the attention budgeting tool, fill it out, really think about those constraints, look at your calendar, try to figure out, are these things comporting? And if you'd like to take the next step and deepen, your relationship with Virgils Inc., you have all these other resources and programs and personalized guidance available to you as well. So let's get back to reality. Let's use technology for good, and get started by performing this attention budgeting exercise. All right. Good luck.